Calvin Redding was the kind of man the world rarely paused to notice. Soft-spoken and steady. He didn't command rooms or chase applause. At 38, he lived a quiet life in Richmond, Virginia, working long shifts as a warehouse supervisor. When he wasn't on the clock, he spent his time restoring his late mother's aging house, peeling wallpaper, rewiring light fixtures, sanding floors with care only a son could understand. He loved old detective novels, classic jazz records, and helping his elderly neighbors with their errands. That's where he was in life when he met Jada Monroe, at a church outreach event, handing out groceries to struggling families. Jada had just been laid off from a receptionist job. She wore uncertainty like a heavy coat, her confidence frayed at the edges. Calvin offered her rides to job interviews, bought her food when he could, and sat with her after prayer meetings just to listen. She told him he was her calm in the storm. He believed her. They started dating soon after. Calvin wasn't flashy. He didn't have fancy clothes or fast money, but he was loyal, attentive, and honest. When he proposed less than a year later, she said yes without hesitation. Friends and family whispered that Calvin was too good for her. But Calvin didn't see love as a transaction. To him, love was about presence, commitment, and standing by someone when it wasn't easy. What he didn't realize was that Jada had fallen in love with the version of him she could talk about, not the real man he was. She liked the sound of a dependable partner when speaking to her friends. But in private, she dismissed his ambitions. Calvin once told her about his dream of opening a small auto repair shop, a vision rooted in childhood weekends spent with his late father. She waved it off. "That's not realistic," she said. "We need to focus on my goals first." And Calvin, ever generous, agreed. He used his savings, money he'd quietly tucked away for years, to help Jada launch a mobile beauty business. He designed her website, paid for equipment, managed her bookings, and even chauffeured her to clients. As her clientele grew, her affection waned. She stopped holding his hand. She let his calls go unanswered. When he finally asked if something was wrong, she looked him in the eye and said, "A real man doesn't need constant attention." So Calvin folded inward, mistaking neglect for a rough patch. He stayed quiet, hoping love would catch up to effort. As Jada's business grew, so did her contempt. She belittled his job, his clothes, even the way he talked. She mocked him at family gatherings, speaking over him or dismissing his thoughts with a laugh. Her friends treated him like background noise, never including him in conversations. Still he stayed. He cooked, he paid bills, he made her tea when she was sick. Calvin believed marriage had seasons, some colder than others, and he told himself this was winter. But the cold only deepened. Jada began staying out late, often claiming networking dinners. Calvin trusted her until small details stopped adding up. She wore new heels he'd never seen, posted vague pictures of dinners with wine glasses and no company shown. When he gently asked about it, she snapped, "You don't get to interrogate me. I'm not your child." One night, she came home at 2 a.m. smelling like expensive cologne. When Calvin calmly asked where she had been, she scoffed, "Don't start acting jealous. You knew what I was when you married me." And with that, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving him stunned in the hallway. That night, he sat on the porch until the sun came up, replaying everything. His sister Denise noticed something was wrong. His eyes looked heavier. His smiles had disappeared. "You all right, Cal?" she asked one Sunday afternoon. He forced a grin. "We're just going through a rough patch," he lied. But the truth was suffocating him. Jada refused to visit his side of the family. She called them country and embarrassing. So Calvin went alone. He never spoke badly about her. Loyalty to him wasn't circumstantial. It was rooted in dignity, even when undeserved. Still he ate. The woman he once prayed for now treated him like an obstacle. She met every act of kindness with cold indifference. He warmed her car on winter mornings, folded her laundry, and left notes of encouragement in her planner. She responded with silence or sarcasm. And yet he stayed. Not because he didn't see the truth, but because letting go meant admitting the love he gave was never truly received. Everything unraveled on a Sunday. Calvin had invited his family over for dinner. He made ribs, potato salad, and played Sam Cooke on the stereo. He cleaned the house top to bottom, even arranged fresh flowers in a vase. Jada arrived 2 hours late, dressed like she was headed to a nightclub. She barely acknowledged anyone, plopped down at the table, and scrolled through her phone. When Denise asked how her business was going, Jada smirked and said, "Thriving despite carrying dead weight at home." Silence fell. Calvin looked up, confused. She met his gaze and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I only married you because I felt sorry for you." No one laughed. No one moved. Then she stood up and added, "Matter of fact, why don't you go ahead and pack your things tonight? I'm done pretending." She walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Calvin sat still, blinking at his plate. His mother reached for his hand, but he slowly stood. "I'm sorry y'all had to see that," he said, voice low and breaking. He cleared the dishes, packed leftovers, and washed the pots like nothing had happened. But inside, something in him shattered. That night, he slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed, "I only married you because I felt sorry for you." By morning, he'd made up his mind. He packed a small duffel bag, 2 shirts, jeans, and his work boots. Jada sat at the kitchen counter sipping coffee, phone in hand. "Make sure you don't take anything that's mine," she said flatly. He nodded and left without another word. He drove to Denise's house. The door opened before he could knock. "You good?" she asked. He nodded, eyes red. She didn't push. She just led him to the guest room and closed the door. The following weeks were a blur. Calvin went back to work, but he moved like a man underwater. His co-workers noticed. The light was gone. He stayed late just to avoid going back to an empty room. He spent lunch breaks scrolling through pictures. Old anniversaries, home-cooked dinners, fake smiles. He had given everything, and it was discarded like it meant nothing. Jada posted selfies with captions like "starting fresh" and "peace isn't free." Her followers cheered her glow up, never knowing what it had cost. Calvin said nothing. He didn't defend himself. He was done begging people to understand. Denise suggested he visit Mr. Langston, who ran an old garage Calvin used to volunteer at. The shop smelled of grease and old metal, but it felt like home. Mr. Langston, now nearing 70, still moved around the place with pride. "You got hands like your father," he told Calvin. "But you've been letting the world grind you down." Calvin smiled, but the words hit deep. Mr. Langston offered him weekend work. Nothing major, just enough to keep busy. Calvin accepted. Fixing broken things felt good. Engines made more sense than people. Then one afternoon, Calvin overheard Mr. Langston sighing over bills. "I can't keep this place open much longer." Calvin hesitated. "You ever thought about selling?" Mr. Langston raised an eyebrow. "To who?" "Maybe me." They talked numbers. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible, especially now that Calvin wasn't funding someone else's life. That night, Calvin went home and ran the math. It would take time and discipline, but it was possible. For the first time in years, hope returned. Hope that didn't depend on someone else's approval. He didn't tell anyone. He worked longer hours, cut back on everything, saved every dollar. He wasn't doing it to prove Jada wrong. He was doing it to prove himself right. 3 months later, he signed a contract. Calvin Redding was now the owner of Langston Auto Repair. The shop wasn't much, but it was his. And that meant everything. The man the world overlooked was building something real. Not for applause. Not for revenge. But for himself. He'd lost a woman who never truly loved him. But he'd found the strength to love himself again.